Dr. Emily Roberts was staring at her coffee maker, willing it to brew faster, when every screen in NASA's Planetary Defense Center erupted with the same message. The alien text swirled and shifted before resolving into perfect English. Submit or face extinction. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she reached for her phone and typed out a simple message. Operation Watchdog is no longer a drill. The hegemony's warships had appeared exactly as the quantum detection arrays had predicted, emerging from hyperspace in a perfect hexagonal formation beyond Mars' orbit. Their vessels resembled crystalline snowflakes, each one massive enough to cast shadows on Mars' surface, their hulls refracting sunlight into prismatic displays that would have been beautiful if they weren't so terrifying. In Times Square, people stood motionless, heads tilted back to watch the emergency broadcast screens. In Beijing, late-night crowds gathered in silent clusters beneath street-side displays. In Moscow, morning commuters pressed against subway windows, watching the news unfold on underground monitors. The hegemony's message repeated in every language, on every device capable of receiving the signal. Then something unexpected happened. The fear lasted exactly 8 seconds. In New York, a hot dog vendor looked up at the Times Square screen and snorted, "Yeah, you and what army?" The crowd around him burst into laughter. In a London pub, someone shouted, "Oi! They're about 300 science fiction movies too late." More laughter. In a Tokyo gaming cafe, a teenager wearing a Space Invaders shirt stood up and shouted, "Finally!" The hegemony's crystalline ambassadors, watching through their quantum observation arrays, were puzzled. This wasn't the response their predictive models had forecast. In 12,000 years of expansion, they had encountered 47 civilizations. All had responded with either immediate submission or paralyzing terror. None had responded with memes. Within minutes, social media platforms across Earth exploded with creativity. Someone photoshopped a Karen haircut onto one of the crystalline ships. Another added googly eyes. A trending video showed a TikTok dance challenge called the Submit. That went viral in minutes. Humanity's first response to an alien invasion threat wasn't fear, it was mockery. The hegemony's cultural analysis team was in chaos. They had studied Earth's transmissions, analyzed their military capabilities, assessed their technological level. But they had missed something crucial. They hadn't understood that humans had spent centuries imagining this exact scenario. From H.G. Wells to Independence Day, humans had been mentally preparing for this moment since before they had electricity. In the White House Situation Room, President Rebecca Martinez received the first report from the Lunar Defense Command. "Ma'am, the hegemony ships are exactly where we predicted they would appear." General Anderson reports that Operation Paper Dragon is ready to proceed. The president nodded, a grim smile playing across her face. "And their ship's crystalline structure." "Confirmed, Madam President. Exactly as the Titan base quantum scan suggested 3 years ago. Our weapons systems have been calibrated accordingly." In their flagship, the hegemony's high commander was becoming increasingly agitated. The humans should have been begging for mercy by now. Instead, their global communication networks were buzzing with increased activity. Their military channels, which should have been chaotic with panic, were suspiciously quiet. "High Commander," a junior analyst called out, "we're detecting unusual energy readings from Earth's moon." "Impossible," the High Commander responded. "Our scans showed no significant technological installations on their moon." That's when every human communication channel went silent simultaneously. For 3 full seconds, Earth's entire electromagnetic spectrum went dark. When it came back online, a single message broadcast from Earth's combined military command. "We've spent the last century making movies about this moment. Did you really think we wouldn't have a plan?" The hegemony was about to learn that humanity's greatest talent wasn't making war or peace, it was making preparations. The United Nations Security Council meeting was a masterpiece of theatrical misdirection. As delegates publicly wrung their hands and argued about appeasement strategies, Admiral James "Stormy" Harrison stood in the Cirrus Command Center, watching status indicators turn green across the largest holographic display in the solar system. Sierra Base, operational. A mountain on Mars split open, revealing rows of sleek warships. Luna Complex, ready. The Sea of Tranquility's floor rippled as massive hangar doors displaced millions of tons of lunar regolith. Titan Station, armed. The mysterious methane storms on Saturn's largest moon dissipated, revealing Earth's most advanced shipyards. Harrison allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had spent the last 70 years hiding their real space program behind a civilian facade of clumsy rockets and expensive failures. Every public space mission failure had masked a military success. Every budget overrun had concealed the construction of another fleet. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Jessica Reynolds called out, "the hegemony is broadcasting again. They're demanding to speak with Earth's true military leadership. Apparently, they're not buying the UN's performance." "Well then," Harrison straightened his uniform, "let's not keep them waiting." The holographic projectors activated, bringing the hegemony's high commander into sharp focus. The crystalline being's faceted surface caught the light, creating rainbow patterns across the command center. "You hide your fleets well, humans." The alien's translated voice carried a note of genuine respect. "Perhaps we can negotiate more reasonable terms." Harrison's response was to key a sequence into his command console. Across the solar system, hidden installations began powering up. The hegemony sensors lit up as hundreds of ships emerged from their concealment. From Jupiter's radiation belts, electromagnetic warfare vessels appeared, their specialized hulls designed to ride the gas giant's magnetic field. Out of Venus's acidic clouds came atmospheric strike crafts, built to operate in the most hostile environments. Pluto's orbit revealed the long-range heavy artillery platforms, their rail guns already extending to their full length. "Let me tell you about humanity's greatest victory." Harrison's voice was calm, almost conversational. "It wasn't winning a war. It was convincing everyone, including ourselves sometimes, that we weren't ready for one." The hegemony sensors continued registering new contacts. Ships were appearing from within asteroids, rising from gas giant storms, emerging from planetary magnetic fields that should have made their presence impossible. Those Mars rovers that kept breaking down, automated resupply runs, the failed Venus probes, environmental data collection for our ACID fleet, the lost Jupiter missions, weapons testing, that space junk you detected, distributed sensor network, those amateur radio satellites, targeting grid. Harrison leaned forward, his reflection sharp in the holographic display. Every time we publicly failed to reach the stars, we were secretly preparing to defend them. Because humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our determination. It's our paranoia. The High Commander's crystalline surface flickered with patterns that the translation software identified as extreme concern. "You've been preparing for war since before you knew we existed." "Wrong." Harrison's voice hardened. "We've been preparing for war since before we left our caves. The only difference is the battlefield." That's when the hegemony's tactical display updated one final time. Hidden quantum signatures began appearing around their own fleet. The humans hadn't just prepared for war. They'd already positioned their assets before the hegemony arrived. Now Harrison's voice carried the weight of every human who had ever stood against tyranny. "About those reasonable terms. Humanity has some terms of our own. You have 1 hour to withdraw from our solar system. After that, we stop pretending to be diplomatically inclined." The High Commander's surface rippled with confusion. "And if we refuse? Then we get to test everything we've spent 70 years building. Your choice. But remember, you're not facing a civilization that's afraid of extinction. You're facing one that has spent its entire existence preparing to prevent it." A countdown began. The hegemony struck first, exactly as Admiral Harrison had predicted. Their crystalline ships moved in perfect geometric formations, each vessel synchronized in a battle dance they'd perfected over millennia of conquest. It was beautiful, precise, and exactly the wrong approach against humanity's forces. "Reminds me of the British at Bunker Hill," Harrison muttered, watching the tactical display. "All form, no adaptation." He keyed his command channel. "All ships, execute Operation Broken Mirror." The human fleet scattered in what appeared to be chaos. The hegemony's tactical AI registered the movement as panic, predicting victory within minutes. They couldn't have been more wrong. "Midway Squadron, you have permission to wake the ghosts," Harrison commanded. Immediately, the seemingly random debris field around Mars came alive. What the hegemony had dismissed as space junk revealed themselves as dormant weapon platforms, their targeting systems already locked on. The first shot of the war came from an old SpaceX rocket stage that had been accidentally left in Mars orbit a decade ago. It fired a tungsten rod at 30% light speed, punching through a hegemony cruiser's crystalline hull before their sensors could even register the threat. The mighty vessel shattered like glass in a hurricane. "Normandy Group, begin your run." Harrison watched as Earth's ships demonstrated why humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of three-dimensional combat. While the hegemony fought like classical dancers, humanity fought like street brawlers. Ships rolled and pivoted in ways that made a mockery of conventional space tactics. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds' voice crackled over the comm. "Sir, Thermopylae Squad reports their EMP warheads are having the expected effect. The crystalline ships are resonating exactly as our simulations predicted." The battle space around Mars became a symphony of destruction. Human ships, painted in radar-absorbing black, darted between the gleaming hegemony vessels like sharks among crystal sculptures. Each attack run demonstrated a different aspect of humanity's martial innovation. The hegemony commanders watched in horror as their perfect formations were shredded by tactics they'd never encountered. Human ships would accelerate to attack speed, then cut engines and drift silently, using Mars gravity to slingshot into firing positions. Others released clouds of smart minds that used rudimentary AI to predict and intercept hegemony movement patterns. "Fascinating," Harrison noted, watching a particularly effective maneuver. "They still haven't figured out that we're using their own shield frequencies against them." The human ships were timing their attacks to slit between the pulses of the hegemony's energy shields, a trick developed after years of studying leaked radiation from their cloaked observation posts. A massive hegemony dreadnought, large enough to cast a shadow on Mars, moved to engage the human fleet directly. Harrison smiled. "Gettysburg Wing, they took the bait. Show them why we named you after one of Earth's bloodiest battles." The seemingly fragile human ships demonstrated their true purpose. They weren't built to withstand hits from the hegemony's energy weapons. They were designed to ensure that those hits never landed. Each vessel moved like a boxer, slipping punches while delivering devastating counterstrikes. "Sir," Reynolds reported, "the hegemony is attempting to regroup near Phobos." "Perfect. Signal the Yamato Division. Time to show them why we studied fluid dynamics for space combat." The hidden ships around Phobos revealed themselves, emerging from electromagnetic camouflage. They moved not in formation, but in patterns based on predator swarm behavior. The hegemony's rigid battle doctrine had no counter for ships that fought like a school of piranha. As the battle reached its crescendo, Harrison opened a channel to all human ships. Remember the simulations, remember the training, but most importantly, remember that every science fiction story humanity has ever written was preparing us for this moment. The hegemony's retreat began 12 minutes later. Their once perfect formation was in shambles, their mighty fleet reduced to retreating survivors. As they fled, Harrison broadcast one final message. "Consider this a demonstration. Next time, we won't be holding back." In the crystalline chambers of the hegemony's flagship, now retreated to the safety of the Kuiper Belt, First Scholar Vexterra projected her findings to the assembled High Council. Her faceted surface rippled with patterns of deep distress as she displayed her analysis. "Honorable Council, We have gravely misunderstood the humans. Her translated voice carried notes of both fear and fascination. They are not merely resistant to our rule. They are systematically designed by their own evolution to reject it. The display shifted to show human historical records. Every species we've encountered reached space through gradual cooperation, achieving unity before reaching for the stars. Humans. She highlighted a series of images. The V-2 rocket, the space race, the Cold War satellites. They reached space because they were trying to gain military advantages over each other. The council chambers filled with patterns of disbelief as Vexterra continued. Their first space programs weren't scientific missions. They were military operations disguised as civilian endeavors. Their first satellite, a proof of concept for weapons delivery. Their moon landing, a demonstration of missile accuracy and propulsion capabilities. She projected images of human entertainment, science fiction movies, books, games. What we dismissed as primitive imagination was actually a sophisticated cultural preparation program. These weren't stories. They were thought experiments, war games, vaccination against the fear of alien contact. The High Commander interrupted, his crystalline surface pulsing with urgent patterns. Explain their battle tactics. No species should have been able to counter our formations so effectively. Vexterra's response was immediate, because they've been fighting themselves for their entire history. Look at this. She displayed analysis of the Mars battle. These maneuvers, adapted from something they call submarine warfare. These ambush tactics, developed by their ancient nomadic warriors. Their entire military doctrine is built on thousands of years of constant combat evolution. The chamber darkened as she projected her most disturbing finding. Most concerning is their technological development pattern. Charts and graphs appeared, showing advancement rates. Every species we've encountered shows slower development during conflicts. But humans, the human graph spiked dramatically during periods of war. They advance faster under threat. War doesn't stifle their progress, it accelerates it. A junior analyst projected a query. Could we not simply overwhelm them with numbers? Vexterra's surface rippled with what the translation software identified as grim amusement. They have stories about that too. They call it quantity versus quality. Their entire industrial base is designed to shift to war production with terrifying efficiency. During something they call World War II, one of their nations went from producing civilian vehicles to building warships in under a month. The High Commander's surface displayed patterns of deep concern. Surely they have some weakness. Their greatest weakness is also their greatest strength. Vexterra responded. They never stop fighting. Even in peace, they prepare for war. Their training simulations are more intense than most species' actual combat. They maintain military readiness even when there's no visible threat. They call it paranoia. The ability to fear and prepare for threats that don't yet exist. She projected one final image, a human child playing with a toy spaceship. From infancy, they imagine scenarios of invasion and resistance. Their young train for war through play. Their entertainment glorifies martial prowess. Their history celebrates successful defenders against overwhelming odds. The council chamber fell silent as Vexterra delivered her final analysis. We didn't find another civilization to conquer. We found the only species in known space that has spent its entire existence preparing for our arrival. Not because they knew we were coming, but because they believed that something like us would eventually arrive. A council elder's surface rippled with patterns of horrified realization. By the first light, we haven't started a war. We've awakened a civilization of warriors who have been dreaming of this fight for their entire history. In the silence that followed, Vexterra added a final chilling observation, and judging by their response to our arrival, they're enjoying every minute of it. Operation Liberty Bell is now in effect. Admiral Harrison announced to the assembled fleet commanders. The holographic star map before them highlighted dozens of hegemony systems in angry red. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to show them why humanity doesn't play defense for long. The U.S. Lexington, Earth's first true stealth carrier, slipped through the quantum wake of a hegemony supply line. Behind it came the combined strike fleet. American, Chinese, Russian, and European vessels moving in perfect coordination. Decades of war games and joint exercises had forged Earth's competing militaries into a single deadly instrument. Multiple hegemony signatures detected in the Proxima Centauri system. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds reported from her tactical station. Their patrol pattern suggests they haven't detected us. Harrison smiled. Launch Operation Trojan Horse. Seemingly damaged human merchant vessels appeared in the system, broadcasting distress signals. The hegemony warships moved to investigate, their sensors detecting no threats. They never saw the quantum-shifted warships emerging from calculated blind spots in their detection grid. "Sir," Reynolds called out, excitement in her voice. "The Chinese contingent reports successful deployment of the Dragon's Teeth defense satellites. The Russians have their Maskirovka field generators online. The trap was sprung." As the hegemony ships approached the damaged merchants, they found themselves caught in a web of overlapping fields that turned their own shield frequencies against them. Each merchant vessel suddenly sprouted weapon ports, revealing themselves as heavily armed Q-ships. Another tactic humanity had perfected centuries ago. "All ships, execute maneuver independence," Harrison commanded. The human fleet moved like a school of predators, each ship knowing its role in the deadly dance. The hegemony's crystalline vessels, beautiful but predictable, had no defense against attacks coming from vectors their tactical doctrine declared impossible. From her station, Reynolds watched the tactical display with pride. "Sir, the Indian cyber warfare team has successfully penetrated their quantum communication network. The Brazilians are deploying their solar mirror arrays." The battle space lit up as concentrated beams of solar energy, reflected and amplified through precisely positioned arrays, struck the crystalline ships. The hegemony's thermal compensation systems, designed for conventional energy weapons, couldn't handle the focused power of a star itself. "Send in the Israeli gravity wake disruptors," Harrison ordered. "Let's show them another human innovation." Small, agile ships darted between the larger vessels, their exotic engines creating ripples in spacetime itself. The hegemony ships, suddenly finding their carefully calculated trajectories disrupted, began colliding with each other. "Sir," Reynolds' voice carried a note of triumph. "The Japanese kamikaze drones have reached their targets. Quantum detonation in 3, 2, 1. The explosion wasn't visible to the human eye, but the quantum sensors showed the devastation. The carefully coordinated drone strikes had shattered the hegemony's command and control structure, their crystalline communication relays exploding in cascading chain reactions. Harrison opened a channel to all Earth forces. Phase 2 begins now. Show them why humans write stories about resistance movements. Across the system, seemingly dead hulks of destroyed ships suddenly powered up. Debris fields revealed themselves as carefully positioned weapon platforms. Every piece of wreckage from previous battles had been repurposed, turned into a trap waiting to be sprung. "Confirmed hits on all primary targets," Reynolds reported. "The hegemony fleet is in full retreat. They're broadcasting warnings to their other systems." Harrison nodded grimly. "Let them run. Let them tell others what they saw here." He turned to the tactical display, where dozens of other hegemony systems awaited Earth's attention. Humanity spent millennia dreaming up ways to fight enemies like them. It's time they learned why we call ourselves the apex predators. The fleet regrouped, their formation now a perfect mirror of the hegemony's once proud battle geometry. But where the aliens' formation had been rigid and unchanging, humanity's was fluid, adaptive, ready to shift at a moment's notice. "Next target," Harrison commanded, "their capital world. Let's show them what happens when you try to cage a species that spent its entire existence breaking free." Colonel Michael Ghost Walker stood before a group of resistance fighters on the occupied world of Kepler 186f. The assembled aliens, a mix of silicon-based crystalline beings, methane-breathing giants, and creatures that seemed to shift between gas and solid states, watched as he pulled up a holographic display of Earth's most famous insurgencies. Guerrilla warfare isn't about winning every battle, Walker explained, his translator converting his words into a dozen different languages. It's about making sure your enemy loses even when they win. The Resistance Cell's leader, a crystalline being named Zixera, who had defected from the hegemony, raised a faceted appendage. But the hegemony's formations are perfect. Their responses are absolute. Walker grinned. Exactly. And that's their weakness. He projected images of Earth's historical resistance movements. The more rigid your enemy's doctrine, the easier it is to predict, and therefore defeat. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. On gas giant moons, Earth's special forces taught methane-breathing rebels how to turn their atmosphere into a weapon. In crystalline cities, human hackers showed silicon-based resistance fighters how to corrupt the hegemony's perfect lattice networks with chaos theory algorithms. "Sir," Lieutenant Sarah Cooper's voice crackled through Walker's comm. The Arcturus cell just executed their first operation. The hegemony lost an entire supply convoy to hit-and-run tactics. Walker nodded with satisfaction. Earth's military advisors had spread across hundreds of systems, each teaching different aspects of humanity's art of war. The hegemony's empire, built on precision and predictability, had no defense against the controlled chaos they introduced. Remember, Walker addressed his students, the hegemony expects submission. They've never faced species who learn to resist. But humans. He projected images of famous Earth rebellions. We've been practicing resistance since before we invented writing. The aliens watched in fascination as Walker demonstrated improvised weapons, asymmetric tactics, and the art of turning an enemy's strength into a weakness, a gaseous being swirled in patterns of confusion. But how do we defeat their superior technology? It asked through the translator. Walker projected new images of Vietnamese soldiers defeating American helicopters, of Afghan warriors overwhelming Soviet tanks, of ancient Romans being ambushed in German forests. Superior technology means nothing against superior tactics, he explained. The hegemony thinks war is about force meeting force. Humans know better. War is about solving problems, and every problem has a solution if you're creative enough. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. On a desert world, resistance fighters used human-taught sand warfare tactics to ambush hegemony patrols. In an ice system, rebels adapted Earth's Arctic warfare techniques to turn frozen ammonia seas into death traps. Most importantly, Walker continued, manipulating the holographic display. We're teaching you something the hegemony never understood: how to learn from failure. The resistance leaders watched as he showed them battle footage. See here. The hegemony uses the same tactics even after they fail. But look at the human fleet. Each defeat teaches us something new. We adapt. We evolve. We come back stronger. Zixera's crystalline surface rippled with understanding. This is why the hegemony fears humans so much. You don't just teach war. You teach evolution. Exactly. Walker smiled. And now we're teaching the galaxy to evolve too. The uprising spread like wildfire. Each victory inspired more defections. Each successful tactic was adapted and improved upon. The hegemony found itself fighting shadows, facing an enemy that refused to mass for conventional battle. "Sir," Cooper reported, "the Sirius Sector Resistance just liberated their third planet. They're using those modified mining charges exactly as we taught them." Walker opened a channel to Earth Command. "Admiral Harrison, the pieces are in place. The galaxy is ready for Phase 3. As he watched his alien students practicing their new skills, Walker recalled an old Earth saying, "Give a man a fish, and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime." Humanity hadn't just taught the galaxy how to fight. They taught it how to be free. "They're coming," Lieutenant Commander Reynolds announced. her voice steady despite the massive fleet signatures appearing on the tactical display. The hegemony is committing everything they have left. Over 10,000 ships, including designs we've never seen before. Admiral Harrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. Enterprise, humanity's most advanced warship, watching as the largest armada in galactic history emerged from quantum space. The hegemony's desperate final assault had begun. Well, he smiled grimly. They're right on schedule. Signal the coalition forces. Operation Endgame is now active. Earth's combined fleet moved into position, but they weren't alone. Ships of every description joined the formation. Crystalline vessels piloted by hegemony defectors, massive gas mining platforms converted to warships by methane-breathing rebels, living ships grown by silicon-based resistance fighters. Humanity had not only taught the galaxy to fight, they taught it to innovate. "Sir," Reynolds reported, "the Japanese quantum ghost fleet is in position. Chinese gravity mines are armed. Russian Maskarovka fields are at full power." The hegemony fleet advanced in their characteristic perfect formation, but something was different. Their ships moved with desperate speed, their normally precise patterns showing signs of strain. They had learned to fear human ingenuity, but they hadn't learned how to counter it. "Launch Operation Ragnarok," Harrison commanded. The space around Earth's solar system came alive. Quantum sensors detected thousands of small objects accelerating from the Kuiper Belt, civilian mining drones, reprogrammed for war. From the asteroid belt, seemingly dead space rocks revealed themselves as camouflaged weapon platforms. Even the debris from previous battles had been weaponized, each piece a carefully positioned part of humanity's grand trap. "First wave of hegemony ships entering the kill zone," Reynolds announced. "Their shields are at maximum power." Harrison nodded. "Execute the Thermopylae Gambit." The coalition fleet scattered in apparent chaos, executing maneuvers that seemed random to the hegemony's tactical eye. But like everything humans had taught their allies, the chaos was carefully controlled. As the hegemony fleet pushed forward, following predictable pursuit patterns, they found themselves caught in a three-dimensional web of overlapping fields and force vectors. "Now," Harrison ordered, "every piece of space debris, every dormant platform, every hidden weapon suddenly activated." The hegemony fleet found itself caught in crossfire from every direction. Their perfect formation, maintained for millennia, finally broke. "Sir," Reynolds called out, excitement in her voice. "The Brazilian solar mirrors are in position. Indian cyber warfare teams report successful penetration of their command networks." The battle space lit up as concentrated stellar energy struck precisely calculated points in the hegemony formation. Ships that survived found their quantum communication networks corrupted by chaos theory algorithms, their perfect coordination shattered. Harrison opened a channel to all coalition forces. "Remember what humanity taught you. Victory isn't about strength. It's about using your enemy's strength against them." The coalition forces demonstrated how well they'd learned. Gaseous beings turned their ships into living weapons, phase shifting through hegemony shields. Crystalline rebels used their natural resonance to shatter enemy vessels from within. Each species brought their unique abilities to the fight, coordinated by human tactical doctrine. "Hegemony flagship detected," Reynolds reported. "They're attempting to rally their forces." Harrison smiled. "Signal the resistance cells within their fleet. Time to show them why humans write so many stories about betrayal." Throughout the hegemony formation, loyal crews suddenly found themselves fighting their own ships as sleeper agents activated. The perfect crystalline lattice of their command structure shattered from within. "Sir," Reynolds' voice was quiet with awe. "They're broadcasting a surrender request." Harrison looked at the tactical display, where the remnants of the hegemony fleet hung broken and scattered across space. Their mighty armada, built over thousands of years, had lasted less than 17 hours against humanity's coalition. "Send our response," he ordered. "Tell them what humans have been saying to tyrants since we first learned to speak. We would rather die on our feet than live on our knees." The solar sunset, as the battle would become known, marked the end of the hegemony's rule. But more importantly, it marked the beginning of humanity's legacy, teaching the galaxy that freedom was worth fighting for. 5 years after the solar sunset, Admiral James Harrison stood at the podium in the newly constructed Galactic Assembly on Mars, addressing representatives from over 300 species. The crystalline dome above showed Earth rising over the Martian horizon, a sight that had once struck fear into the galaxy, but now symbolized hope. The hegemony believed that order came from submission. Harrison began, his words translated into a symphony of languages. They were wrong. True order comes from freedom, the freedom to choose, to innovate, and yes, even to fight when necessary. In the assembly hall, former enemies sat side by side. Crystalline beings whose ancestors had served the hegemony now worked alongside the gaseous entities they had once oppressed. Methane-breathing giants exchanged cultural knowledge with silicon-based life forms. Unity, it turned out, was stronger when chosen freely rather than enforced. Humanity's greatest export wasn't our military technology. Harrison continued, gesturing to the holographic display showing trading routes between systems. It wasn't our tactical doctrine or our weapons. It was something far more powerful, the idea that every species has the right to determine its own destiny. The display shifted to show the Galactic Defense Academy, where human instructors taught alongside alien veterans of the uprising. Young beings from across the galaxy learned not just military tactics, but the principles that had made Earth's resistance possible: adaptation, innovation, and the strength found in diversity. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Reynolds, now Ambassador Reynolds, approached the podium with a data tablet. The last Hegemony Rehabilitation Center has completed its transition. Their entire species has been successfully integrated into the Confederation. Harrison nodded with satisfaction. The hegemony's fall hadn't led to their destruction. Humanity had insisted on rehabilitation over revenge. Their rigid perfection had been replaced with something more valuable: the ability to change and grow. In orbit above Mars, the massive shipyards that had once secretly built Earth's defense fleet now constructed vessels of peace and exploration. The same innovative spirit that had created weapons of war was now focused on solving the galaxy's greatest challenges. Humanity's drive to prepare for the worst had transformed into a determination to build the best possible future. Look at what we've achieved together. Harrison gestured to another hologram showing the first joint species expedition preparing to explore beyond the galaxy's edge. The ship's crew included former hegemony commanders working alongside the very beings they had once tried to subjugate. In the Academy's historical wing, alien children gathered around displays showing the story of Earth's resistance. They played with models of famous ships, not as symbols of war, but as reminders of the price of freedom. The U.S. Enterprise, once humanity's most powerful warship, had been transformed into a museum, its halls filled with visitors learning how determination and innovation had changed the course of galactic history. But our greatest victory, Harrison continued, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom, wasn't defeating the hegemony. It was proving that strength doesn't come from enforcing uniformity. It comes from embracing our differences and learning from each other. The assembly hall erupted in a cacophony of approval expressed in hundreds of different ways. Crystalline beings glowing with patterns of joy, gaseous entities swirling in excited eddies, methane breathers releasing pleased pheromones. Unity, Earth had shown them, didn't require uniformity. 5 years ago, they demanded our submission, Harrison concluded, looking out at the assembled representatives of a free galaxy. Instead, we gave them something they never expected: a future where no species needs to submit to another. A future where the only authority we recognize is the collective will of free beings choosing to work together. As the applause died down, a young crystalline being approached Harrison with a question that brought a smile to his face. Is it true that humans imagined all of this before it happened? That you dreamed of the stars before you could reach them? Yes, Harrison replied, looking up at the Earth shining through the dome. That's humanity's real superpower. We don't just face the future. We imagine it, we shape it, and we never stop working to make it better than our dreams. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their ships or their tactics. It was their ability to imagine a better future, and their determination to make that future real.